Wait a minute. Dr. Morrison, are you telling me that millions of Americans are walking around with toxic time bombs in their mouths?
That's exactly what I'm telling you, Adam. And the worst part? They have no idea. I'm talking about people over 50 who've been wearing dentures for decades. Dentures made with materials that we now know are basically poison to the human body.
That's terrifying. How many people are we talking about here?
About 40 million Americans use some type of dental prosthesis. Of those, at least 70% have dentures made before 2010, when there were no strict regulations on the materials used. We're talking about a silent epidemic that no one wants to admit.
Oh my. And why isn't anyone talking about this? Because there's a lot of money involved, Adam. A lot of money.
And now, it's starting another Dr. Secrets podcast.
Dr. Morrison, our listeners need to understand this. Are you telling us that the very dentures meant to help people are actually poisoning them slowly? Let me be very direct with you and everyone listening right now. For decades, the dental industry used cheap and toxic materials in dentures. I'm talking about mercury, cadmium, nickel, beryllium, heavy metals that literally dissolve into your saliva every single day, 24/7.
Does that mean people are swallowing these metals?
Not just swallowing, Adam. These metals are being absorbed directly into the bloodstream through the mucous membranes in the mouth. It's a much faster and more efficient absorption route than the digestive system. Within 15 minutes, those metals are circulating through your brain, your kidneys, your liver.
Dr. Morrison, I need to pause here because this is genuinely scaring me. My own mother has been wearing dentures for over 20 years. Are you saying she could be poisoning herself every single day without knowing it?
Adam, your mother needs to get a heavy metal test immediately, and I'll tell you why. Just last week, I saw a 67-year-old patient, Margaret, who had been using the same partial denture for 23 years. She came into my office complaining of chronic fatigue, memory problems, unexplained joint pain. Her doctors couldn't find the cause.
And it was the denture?
We ran a spectroscopy test on her denture and found alarming levels of mercury and cadmium leaching from the material. Her blood test showed heavy metal levels 300% above the safety threshold. 300%, Adam.
That's criminal. How is this allowed?
Because regulation came too late. Before 2010, practically any material could be used in dentures. I'm talking about cheap metal alloys from China, with compositions that sometimes even included lead. And those dentures are still sitting in millions of people's mouths.
Dr. Morrison, for our listeners tuning in right now, how can they know if they're at risk?
I'll give you very specific signs that could indicate heavy metal poisoning from dentures. First, a persistent metallic taste in the mouth, especially in the morning. Second, fatigue that doesn't improve with rest. Third, memory and concentration problems that develop gradually. Fourth, joint pain with no apparent cause. Fifth, frequent irritation in the gums or tongue.
Wait, those symptoms are really common in older people. Don't doctors usually just chalk that up to normal aging?
Exactly. And that's the big problem, Adam. Heavy metal poisoning mimics aging symptoms. That's why this epidemic has gone unnoticed for so long. Doctors are diagnosing normal aging when it's actually chronic poisoning.
That makes me furious. How many people could have a better quality of life if they knew about this?
Millions, Adam. Literally, millions. And look, I'm not just talking about discomfort here. I'm talking about serious consequences. Chronic mercury poisoning is directly linked to early-onset dementia. Cadmium silently destroys the kidneys. Nickel can trigger autoimmune diseases.
Dr. Morrison, let's be practical here. If someone suspects their denture is causing these issues, what should they do?
First, never remove the denture on your own. That can be dangerous. Second, find a dentist who specializes in biocompatible materials, not just any dentist, because many aren't still aware of this issue.
Third, get a heavy metal test for both blood and urine. Fourth, if poisoning is confirmed, start a medically supervised chelation protocol. Chelation, can you explain that for our listeners? Chelation is a medical process that removes heavy metals from the body using specific substances that bind to those metals and help them eliminate them. But be warned, this should only be done under the care of a qualified medical professional. Never try this on your own with products sold online.
Dr. Morrison, you mentioned that not all dentists are aware of this issue. How can people find a qualified professional?
Look for dentists who practice biological dentistry or holistic dentistry. These professionals are trained to identify toxic materials and work with safer alternatives. It's also important to ask directly, do you test the biocompatibility of the materials you use? If the answer is vague, find another dentist.
Is there any way for people to test their own dentures at home?
There's a simple test that can give an initial indication. Get a piece of pH paper, the kind you find at aquarium or pool supply stores. Moisten the denture with saliva and press it against it. If the pH reads very acidic, below 6, it could indicate that metals are dissolving. It's not definitive, but it's a red flag.
That's something anyone can do. Dr. Morrison, let's talk prevention. For those who need to get new dentures, what materials are safe?
The safest dentures today are made from zirconia or pure ceramic with no metal alloys. There are also biocompatible resins free from BPA and metals. The important thing is always to ask your dentist for a biocompatibility certificate for the material. If they don't know what you're talking about, switch dentists.
Dr. Morrison, do you have any patient cases where someone had a dramatic recovery after replacing their denture?
I have dozens of cases, Adam. But there's one that really stuck with me. Robert, 72 years old, retired Navy. He had been wearing a fixed bridge made with nickel for 18 years. Developed severe rheumatoid arthritis, started having memory lapses, and his wife was already considering specialized care because she thought it was Alzheimer's.
And it was the denture?
We removed the bridge and replaced it with zirconia, started medically supervised chelation. Within 6 months, his arthritis improved by 80%. His memory fully returned. Today, he goes hiking with his wife and is driving again. His family couldn't believe that it was just the denture causing all of that.
Stories like that make me both emotional and furious. Emotional for the recovery, furious because it was unnecessary suffering. And look at him. This isn't an isolated case. The international medical literature already acknowledges the toxicity of old dental materials. In Germany, for example, there's been a law banning mercury in any dental procedure since 2008. Here in the United States, regulation is still weak. Why do you think there's so much resistance to admitting this problem? Money, Adam, pure and simple. Imagine the economic impact if 40 million Americans found out they need to replace their dentures. We're talking billions of dollars. And there's also the legal aspect. How many people could sue the dentists who installed those toxic dentures? Dr. Morrison, many of our older listeners live on fixed incomes or retirement funds. Getting a new denture can be really expensive. Are there any alternatives? I completely understand that concern. First, many health insurance plans cover denture replacement if there's a medical justification, and heavy metal poisoning is more than a valid reason. Second, there are dental school clinics that offer procedures at reduced costs. Third, it's better to go through a gradual removal process than to keep poisoning yourself. Gradual removal? In severe cases of poisoning, removing the entire denture at once can trigger a spike in metal release. Some protocols recommend replacing the denture in stages, always with simultaneous chelation, but that needs to be evaluated case by case by a qualified professional. Dr. Morrison, you mentioned this affects the immune system. Can you explain that better?
Heavy metals are recognized by the immune system as invaders. The body stays in a state of chronic inflammation, trying to fight off something it can't eliminate. This leads to what we call immune fatigue. Your defense system becomes overloaded and stops working properly. That's why these people get sick more often.
Is there a connection to cancer?
Adam, that's a serious question and deserves a responsible answer. Some heavy metals, like nickel and beryllium, are classified by the World Health Organization as known carcinogens. Chronic exposure can increase the risk, especially for cancers of the mouth, throat, and digestive system. I'm not saying every denture causes cancer, but the risk exists, and it's real.
This should be mandatory information for anyone getting a denture.
It should be, but it's not. That's why programs like ours are so important, Adam. We're giving people information they have the right to know, but that doesn't reach them through traditional channels.
Dr. Morrison, to wrap up this part of the conversation, what are the emergency signs that indicate severe poisoning?
Hand tremors, sudden mental confusion, a very strong metallic taste that won't go away, severe mouth irritation with sores that don't heal, and sudden personality or mood changes. If someone has these symptoms and wears an old denture, they need to seek medical attention immediately and mention the suspicion of heavy metal poisoning.
Dr. Morrison, our listeners are hearing this and probably many are scared and worried. What would you like to say directly to them?
Adam, I want everyone to understand one thing. You are not to blame for this situation. You trusted professionals and an industry that was supposed to protect your health. But now that you know the truth, you have the power to make a decision that could literally save your life.
And what would that decision be?
Don't ignore the signs your body is giving you. That fatigue you think is just age, those memory problems you're blaming on getting older, those random aches that came out of nowhere, they might not be normal. They could be symptoms of poisoning. What's the first practical step our listeners should take today? Tonight, before going to bed, do an honest self-check. When was the last time you felt truly well, full of energy, with a clear mind? If it's been years and you wear dentures, it's not a coincidence. Tomorrow morning, call a dentist who specializes in biocompatible materials and schedule a consultation. And if they face resistance from professionals, if a dentist brushes you off when you ask about material toxicity, if they say they've never heard of this, if they try to minimize your concerns, walk out and find another one. Your life is worth more than anyone's convenience or pride. Dr. Morrison, let me ask a direct question. In your medical opinion, how many of the people listening to us right now could be affected by this problem? Adam, based on my clinical experience and the available epidemiological data, I'd say at least 30% of our listeners who wear old dentures are suffering from some degree of heavy metal poisoning. 30%. It's a scary number, but it's reality.
30%. That's thousands of people just among our listeners.
And every single one of those people deserves to know the truth and have the chance to reclaim their health. That's why I'm here today, Adam, not to scare people, but to alert them. Not to sell miracle solutions, but to provide life-saving information.
Dr. Morrison, if you could leave one final piece of advice, what would it be?
Don't accept decline as inevitable. If you're not feeling well, if your quality of life isn't what it should be, investigate. Ask hard questions. Demand answers. And remember, you have the right to health, the right to truth, and it's never too late to take control of your own life.
Folks, that was Dr. Morrison, revealing truth that should have been told long ago. If you recognized yourself in any of the symptoms mentioned today, don't wait until tomorrow. Your health can't wait.
And remember, knowledge is power. Now you know, now you can act. Don't let another day go by being a victim of a system that failed you. Take control today.
Dr. Morrison, before we close, I need to ask one more question that I know our listeners are thinking. Is there any way to protect those who can't replace their denture immediately?
Excellent question, Adam. While someone can't get a replacement, there are protective measures. First,
Rinse with warm water and sea salt twice a day. This helps neutralize the acidity that accelerates corrosion. Second, supplement with powerful antioxidants like vitamin C, E, and selenium, but always under medical supervision. Third, increase filtered water intake to help flush out toxins.
Is there any specific food that helps with detoxification?
Yes, there are natural chelating foods. Fresh cilantro is one of the most powerful, great in salads or juices. Seaweeds like chlorella and spirulina are also excellent. Raw garlic contains sulfur compounds that help eliminate heavy metals. But please, these foods are supportive. They don't replace proper treatment. Dr. Morrison, you mentioned Germany has specific legislation. What other countries are ahead of the US on this issue? Sweden completely banned mercury use in dentistry since 2009. Canada has much stricter regulations than we do. France mandates biocompatibility testing for all dental materials. Even some Mexican states have more protective laws than many US states. We're behind, Adam, way behind. That's infuriating. Our own citizens are less protected than people in other countries. And the worst part is we have the technology, the knowledge, the safe materials. What's missing is political will and public pressure. That's why conversations like ours are essential. When people start demanding change, things happen.
Speaking of public pressure, is there any organization or movement our listeners can support?
Yes, there's the International Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicology, which fights for stricter regulations. There's also Consumers for Dental Choice, which advocates for patient rights. These organizations need support and exposure. The more people become aware of the problem, the more strength we'll have to push for change.
Dr. Morrison, I need to ask something personal. Do you wear dentures?
I don't, Adam, but if I ever needed to, I'd only use zirconia or biocompatible ceramic, and I'd get a biocompatibility test done before installation. My entire family knows this information. Unfortunately, medical knowledge is sometimes a privilege when it should be a right for everyone.
Is there a specific blood test people should ask their doctor for?
Yes, there are specific panels. Ask for a heavy metals test by mass spectrometry or a toxic metals panel. It should include mercury, cadmium, nickel, lead, arsenic, and aluminum. Many doctors aren't familiar with these tests, so bring the names written down and insist it's your right to know what's happening inside your body.
Dr. Morrison, let me ask a direct question. How many American dentists would you estimate know this information?
Honestly, less than 10%. Most were trained to see teeth as mechanical parts, not as part of a complex biological system. They learned to fix teeth, not to consider the systemic impact of the materials they use. It's a serious flaw in dental education.
So that means most dentists are putting in toxic materials without knowing.
Exactly. They're not villains, Adam. They're professionals who were misinformed by the industry itself. But ignorance is no excuse when lives are at stake. It's every professional's responsibility to stay informed about the risks of the materials they use.
And how can people educate their own dentists about this?
Bring printed scientific articles. Ask the dentist to explain the exact composition of the materials they use. Ask if they're familiar with studies on heavy metal toxicity in dental prosthetics. If they can't answer, suggest they update their knowledge. You have that right.
Dr. Morrison, are there specific symptoms that appear quickly after getting a toxic denture?
Yes, there are early warning signs that many people ignore. Persistent metallic taste in the first few weeks, gum irritation that doesn't improve with proper hygiene, frequent headaches that weren't there before, changes in taste. Foods that used to taste good suddenly taste strange. These are red flags that shouldn't be ignored.
And what should people do if these symptoms appear?
Document everything. Write down when the symptoms started, their intensity, frequency. Go back to the dentist immediately and demand answers. If they say it's normal or that it'll go away with time, get a second opinion. Persistent symptoms after getting a denture are never normal.
Dr. Morrison, to close this conversation, what's your prediction for the future? When will this situation change?
It will change when people like you, listening to us right now, start demanding change.
It will change when patients stop accepting whatever material the dentist wants to use. It will change when we start holding people accountable for decades of negligence. The change is in your hands.
Thank you, Dr. Morrison, for having the courage to speak out about this. And thank you to all of you who stayed with us until now. Take care of yourselves, ask questions, investigate. Your life may depend on it.